everybody. It's OneSoccer today as we welcome you inside our studios. Andy Petrillo alongside Gareth Wheeler, Oliver Platt. Today's theme of the show, coaches. Yes, definitely coaches. You have Toronto FC, who has themselves a new coach, York United, who got rid of their coach, and Manchester United, who has named an interim coach. We're also going to get into Jonathan David. Are you humming and hawing over there? My little soundtrack. Jonathan David, he is turning heads in Champions League, and a couple friendlies are coming on up for the Canadian women. They're back on the pitch. They're taking on Mexico. You know we're going to talk about that as they enter World Cup qualifying year. What is with the sound effects today from Gareth? Let's begin with Toronto FC, the worst kept secret. We've been talking about it for about a month now here, but it's official, right? So Bob Bradley, who cut ties, mutually agreed with LAFC to move on. He is now the new head coach of Toronto FC. Ollie, just your thoughts on what we knew was going to be, but is now official.
I think he's the right coach at the right time, to be honest with you. And in a lot of ways, that when you look back at Chris Armas last year, seemed like maybe the wrong manager with not the right idea at the wrong time as well. And there's two sides to it for me. Like, there's the qualities that Bob Bradley has as a coach. I think he's obviously very familiar with Toronto because of Michael. He knows the city, knows the club, has an idea, I think, about what is going to work here. But then there's also just the timing as well. Like, I think Chris Armas was coming into a group where he had very little ability to make changes, right? And to kind of mold the team in his own image. He was going to have to take what he had and work with what he had. Bradley, I think, is going to get much more of an opportunity to look at the DPs, look at the top players on the team, figure out who he thinks he can win with. And if he doesn't think that the group is right now, he's going to get the chance to make changes. And so I think a lot is pointing in the right direction. And I rate him as a coach. I think if they give him the opportunity to really mold the team in his image, give him real freedom to run the club at all levels, as it sounds like they're going to, because they're not going to replace Ali Curtis as the GM, I think this is a guy who can win in Toronto, and I think he can win in style as well.
It was a safe move. And I say that in a very positive way. Obviously, this search has gone on for well over a year now, or over a year now since Greg Vanney left. He interviewed 25 candidates last year. Bob Bradley wasn't one of them. I'm not sure what that says about the 25 people that were interviewed last year. He was in Italy, Bill Manning was. The people that were putting it out there that it was going to be Bobby Smirniotis or this it was never going to be that. There's a connection between the Bradleys and Bill Manning. He's a proven manager in this league. I think that you had to go for the safer option this time around. The interesting part of this all for me is the sporting director title. Yeah. The fact that this is basically an acknowledgement that moving on from Greg Vanney, who wanted more power in decision making, that inevitably was a mistake. And that I think that Bill Manning's doing the right thing here by saying, you know what, we need some help building this back up. It's the Bruce Arena model. That's exactly what happened in New England. Look at the revolution right now by a well-connected, good coach coming into the league and giving them more autonomy to go out and build their team in their own liking. I like the move in that way.
To an extent, I don't know if it is the safe move, because I look at Bob Bradley. I think, yeah, okay, he knows what he's doing in MLS, that's clear, and there's similarities to Bruce Arena there. But for me, Bob Bradley, when you hear him talk about the game and, all the football he watches, the way he thinks about the game, the way his LAFC team plays, I think he's a risk taker as well. I think he's quite a progressive coach and will take some chances here and do things a little bit differently. And that excites me, but I don't think it guarantees success necessarily.
But so that's exactly what Chris Armas was supposed to be. He was a disciple of Jesse Marsch. He wanted to play that all-out combative way. He didn't have the squad to go out and do that, and the decision-making process wasn't in his own hands.
Right, that's
marrying the two, I think that makes sense, and I think that this is an astute hire and can work if the application goes as we all are led on to believe that it will.
So many great things that Bob Bradley also said in his introduction press conference yesterday, but I think he was already asserting his dominance when he basically said, I want players who want to be coached and who want to learn, already kind of sending out the message to a lot of these players, I'm calling the shots here, not you. So with that being the case, Ollie, what should his first order of business be?
It's to figure out who his core guys are, who he can rely on, who he can build around. Obviously, Michael Bradley is going to be a big part of that, and I think he should be. I think he's still got a lot to offer as a Toronto FC player. But then you look at the other DPs. Altidore seems to be gone. I don't think Soteldo is going to be back either. Pozuelo, I think you have to have a conversation with. Obviously, he's had a difficult year on a number of levels, off the field, on the field with his fitness as well. You have to talk to him, and I think you prefer to watch him train, but maybe they don't have the time to do that, to really figure out if he's committed, if he's someone you can rely on. And then you even look at, Jonathan Osorio expressing that he would like to play in Europe. Richie Larea, same thing. Is interest going to materialize in those guys, or are those guys going to be part of your core? And again, those key pieces that you build around, plus the defense, which is a completely open question right now. So you got to figure out just 3 or 4 guys that you can really lean on in this first year and build the rest of the team around.
What's the system going to be? Is it going to be the same 4-3-3 played with Los Angeles? Because if it is, he's going to run into the same issue that all of his predecessors, Perez, Armas, and Vanny dealt with. How do you use Alejandro Pozuelo?
Yeah.
Like, he's such a wonderful player. He's an MVP. Obviously, had a down year. I give him all the credit in the world for opening up and kind of revealing that he split from his wife. He found that it was a very difficult year off the field, and that can permeate, that can really cause problems in the professional realm as well. But how do you play him? Like, he needs to play in an alternative formation to how Bob Bradley plays in LA to get the most out of Pozuelo. He's not a right winger. He's not a left winger. Bob Bradley doesn't play with a false 9. Isn't Pozuelo kind of the key to everything? So does he switch his formation? Do they start building a team in a different way to fit Pozuelo in? Or is, an MVP 2 seasons ago, another odd man out here in Toronto? I think it's a huge decision that needs to be made.
Oh, well, so huge. Well, maybe it's a huge decision, maybe not, depending on where you stand with the fan base here. But right away, a lot of people are kind of calling Toronto FC Bradley FC. So what are the
Bald FC as well.
Oh.
I mean, Bradley and Bill Manning looked like twins. They looked sharp yesterday.
Well, Michael, Bill, Bob.
Ollie was,
So there you go.
Armas, Bald FC.
Okay, we're not here to talk about here. They can have some of mine, which keeps shedding off my head here.
I'll be there someday.
But what are some of the challenges here with coaching your son, especially since we know Michael Bradley is really on the back 9 of his career?
The questions were asked of both Michael and Bob yesterday. I just think the questions are being directed in the wrong place by the media. They were asking the wrong questions. Bob is a consummate professional. I'm excited to see what he does. Like, look, I feel like he had daggers thrown his way unfairly when he was the manager of Swansea because he spoke in a different way. He was American. He was like Ted Lasso before Ted Lasso, but actually knew what he was doing. He's a true pro. Michael's a true pro. First player in, last player out of the training ground. Whatever's decided between those two, I don't think that there'll be any issue whatsoever. They respect one another from obviously a personal and professional level. The question should be asked of Michael's teammates, Toronto FC teammates. How will they react when they know that the captain is related to the head coach of the team? And I don't think we'll have an answer to this question until we get in it and actually see how this team fares. When things are going well and it's a harmonious situation and everyone believes they're on the same page, that's fine. But as soon as some players, aren't in a starting 11, are questioning why one player's starting over another, they might feel uncomfortable going to their captain to get those answers, understanding, he obviously has the ear of his father, who's the head coach. It's a difficult dynamic. I'm not saying that it's one that can't work, but that's typically why we don't see that across professional sports. Like, Austin Rivers was traded away from the team that his father, Doc Rivers, coached in the NBA. Like, these things typically come with some added extra layers that make the situation a little bit more complex. I have full faith in Bob and Michael, but it's the rest of the TFC teammates I think need to be asked that question.
Yeah, it can be complicated, but I've heard from a lot of players over the years that one thing they all appreciate is coaches who communicate clearly and directly and honestly, right? And they're transparent about it. And even if they don't like what they're hearing necessarily, even if they're being left out of the team or, someone's being chosen over them, as long as the coach is direct and doesn't kind of beat around the bush and say one thing to someone else and another thing to them, they respect that, right? And they understand it. And I think Bob Bradley is that type of person who he will make sure that everything is out in the open, everything is done honestly. To be honest, I heard more directness and more bluntness in that press conference yesterday from him than I've heard from anyone at TFC for about 2 years.
But will the players feel the same way? That's the question. I hear all that. I agree with all of that. But, being a professional athlete at this level, it comes with ego. And guess what? There was a lot of ego in that TFC room over the past couple of years. Let's see what this squad actually looks like.
You also shouldn't coddle ego, though. So if players are acting that way, then sorry, maybe you need to go somewhere else.
Well, here's another reason why we don't typically see family members coaching another family member, because what is it that the teammates would worry about? Favoritism, right? So I think, to your point, we won't have an answer until the season progresses, because as long as everyone is being held accountable the exact same way, I think then you're okay with a father coaching his son. TFC, do you think they're a playoff team next season?
It's too early to say. Sorry, I don't want to sit on the fence on this one, but it's tough to say just because we don't know the extent of the changes that are going to come in the off season, right? You know, is one designated player leaving, or is three designated players leaving? Is Osorio staying? Is Larrea staying? What are they going to do in terms of the defensive line? Like, I think they can be in the playoffs next year, but if we're talking about what the real question is, which is winning MLS Cup and contending, it's going to take longer than that, because I think when you go through a transitionary periods, you will not hit on everything, right? They can make 6 or 7 signings this offseason. Not everyone is going to be right. I just don't think there's many clubs with a record of doing that in one single year. So it's going to take time to really get back to full relevance. But can they make the playoffs? Yeah.
Ollie shouldn't stand up. He just split his pants sitting on the fence over there.
Oh my
TFC will be a playoff team, and here's why. What we've seen over the past recent years is this team's willing to invest. They're willing to spend beyond anyone else in Major League Soccer to make things right. Like, it's a high-pressure offseason. A lot of eyeballs are on Toronto FC. I think Bill Manning is dead set on potentially going nuclear. He actually said nothing is off the table. Mm-hmm. You bring in an Insigne, a couple other DPs, at least one other. You address the back. You solve that situation defensively. Why not? There's a whole lot of bang average in the Major League Soccer Eastern Conference. Like, how many teams were fighting for a playoff spot? With it extended to 7, there's no reason. I fully expect TFC to be a playoff team come 2022.
They'll spend, but they've also spent a lot of money badly as well. And that's what I mean, is you
but
can't
they're willing to
guarantee
spend.
they're going to get everything right. That doesn't guarantee
this
success.
This is where I might side with Ollie on this one, because I just want to see some moves right now. Because here's the thing, and you're right, everything's on the table. And Michael Bradley, when he was addressing the media, I'm going to perch myself on that fence. Because here's the thing, even when Michael Bradley gave his press conference, he singled out Jonathan Osorio and Richie Larrea, and he said he wanted to see them take the next step as leaders on this team. But here's the thing, guys, we've discussed it on the show, and we're about to discuss it again. What's the likelihood that one or both of these players can make a move to Europe and possibly not be with TFC next season?
I think one will go and one will stay. Richie Larrea has been much more adamant about him wanting to have that European football experience. At 26, his national team form, I think he's very much in the shop window. I think that he fits a progressive European model of play. If I'm a club in Europe, I take a chance on him. Osorio's a little bit older. I'm not sure if you make that kind of move at this age. I still think he has a critically important role to play with Toronto FC, even though he has this option that needs to be picked up for big money. If I'm TFC, I keep Osorio, and I might give Larrea that opportunity to move on. They hit a home run picking up a player and giving him a second chance. It's time now to pay it forward and now give him another chance to take that next step.
Osorio mentioning that he was looking at, wanting to be in the national team starting 11 was really interesting, because he started 4 games in a row for the national team, but that was when Larin wasn't there, Atiba wasn't there, Davies missed a game, Buchanan missed a game, Canada was stretched a little thin. In the other 4 games where they've pretty much been at full strength, he's played 22 minutes total. I think he'll be looking at that and looking ahead to Qatar and maybe just wondering if he can push himself a bit further and improve those chances with the national team.
But with him, it depends on role so much. Yeah. So we'll see.
Well, welcome back into OneSoccer today. Andy, Gareth, Ollie still with you. Tegucigalpa. There we go. I said I was going to say it on the show, Ollie. That's the Honduran side that Forge is taking on.
Montagua.
Yeah, I didn't say it over the board. I did. I chickened out, but I said it right there. Let's turn our attention to the Canadian Premier League, and let's talk about, though, Forge's opponent in the semifinal of the CPL. That was York United. Defeated them, so it'll be Forge Pacific in the CPL final. But it was a big year for York. We knew they dealt with a lot of injuries. They had young players. In fact, right here on the show, we talked about Jimmy Brennan making the most of this team and making the playoffs for the very first time in franchise history. But clearly, President Angus McNabb did not feel the same, because shortly after being eliminated from the CPL playoffs, Jimmy Brennan was relieved of his head coaching duties. Ollie, were you surprised when you heard this news?
Not really, no. He wasn't actually fired. His contract wasn't extended. And so when you knew he was going into that contract year, was I surprised that didn't continue? Not particularly. Just talking to a few people at York United throughout the season, to be honest, there's not been a big blow up. There's not, big problems there or anything like that. But I've just always felt that there's been a bit of a disconnect between Jimmy Brennan and Angus McNabb in the front office. Obviously Jimmy was there from the very start. Angus came in a year later and, wants to take the club in a much different direction, I think, than we were looking at in 2019, and there were just things where I don't think they quite saw eye to eye. You know, Jimmy questioned, I think, some of the recruitment, maybe certain players or profile of players that he didn't have. And then from the club side, you know, although it's hard to criticize, you know, York United finishing fourth, making the playoffs with a very young roster, I don't think they were necessarily blown away by some of the performances, particularly down the stretch, the way the team was playing as we got to that crucial part of the season. So, as I said, I don't think there's been big controversy here or a big blow-up or anything like that. I just think it was a relationship that didn't quite match up, and they're going to go in a different direction now.
I think you're downplaying it, saying that they didn't quite see eye to eye. They didn't see eye to eye. Quite clearly, if you are a manager and you have experienced players taken out of your team and see them go elsewhere, aka Manny Aparicio, if you're a manager that wants to win now, who's going into a contract year, what do you think when you're just giving a bunch of young, unproven players? Like, of course they don't see eye to eye. Like, the way that the leadership of York United wants to build didn't mesh with Jimmy Brennan's vision of the way that he wanted to coach to win now. Simply put, there's no ifs, ands, or buts about that. That's why this is not a surprise. I think that this was a cloud that was hovering over Jimmy. And despite it all, I thought Brennan did a great job with this team, making this group a playoff team, and he helped make young players better. Abzi, Ferrari, Toussaint, Johnston, like all these players took a step forward under Jimmy Brennan. I just think it's unfortunate that a local guy who has roots within that community and roots within this club is now out of a job for issues that have nothing to do with performance, in my opinion.
I think Jimmy really liked working with the young players. You know,
of course, but he also wants to win.
But maybe there were, in certain parts of the team, were there, could they have used strengthening a bit more experience, particularly up front, I'd say? Maybe. And I think that's where maybe the disconnect was.
So the big question now becomes who replaces Jimmy Brennan as head coach of York United, and a couple Canadian internationals. You know them well. You've been seeing them right here on OneSoccer during World Cup qualifying. Alistair Johnston and Mark-Anthony Kaye have thrown a name into the hat, and that would be Sacko. I mean, he's been around forever. He's actually a former York United assistant coach, and he's been a long-time coach of York Lions, both the men and the women, so of York University there. Joined that organization in 2007, has won 4 national titles on the men's side. What do you make of that, Ollie?
It's pretty remarkable, really, isn't it, that like national team players are coming out and saying this guy should get the job, period. Look, if you speak to a lot of people about Sacko, they will tell you he's, pretty much the closest thing to Bobby Smyrniotis in York region, right? And he's been in this area and working with young players for a long time. In a lot of ways, he makes sense. The question is, what does the club want? I think there's probably on the club side going to be a desire to open up the search, to look not just in Canada but elsewhere as well. Look at different coaches with player development backgrounds and things like that. And there is still this question of what is this club's real identity? Is it a Toronto club? Is it a York region club? That I think is something they're still trying to figure out a little bit, and that does play in, as much as it's an off-field thing, it plays into the on-pitch decisions as well.
I think that a lot of the other clubs in the Canadian Premier League have that local identity. I don't think York has that. And Sacko, I've known him for a long time. He is well known within the soccer community where? In York region. I agree it's a no-brainer, but to Ollie's point, I'm not sure that that's the goal here. I'm not sure that the goal is to embrace that community when people that are running the club don't live in that community and might not have their finger on the pulse of what that actually is. Perhaps they want to look at someone with a more analytical lens. That's fine. And I'm not being critical by saying that. It's about the club to kind of put their stake in the ground and come up with their own mandate. And unfortunately for Alistair and Mark-Anthony Kaye and some people within that community, that might not be the mandate for this club. It's to go on, identify talent, cultivate that talent, hopefully then sell some of it on and go on and make a profit. And I'm not going to hold that against the club or anyone within it, but winning over the hearts and minds of people in York region by hiring Sacko, I just don't see that being kind of the goal of this entire project.
Is the pressure on McNabb here? I mean, he needs to get this right. Do you think if they don't have success next season, he shoulders the blame?
But how do you define success? For me, it's more from a financial perspective. The club wants to, turn a profit or mitigate their losses. They want to be able to go and sell on players. They want to develop players and be competitive in the meantime. You know, is the inevitable goal to go out and win the North Star Shield every year? Yeah, for the players, for the coaches, yes. But when you just see the way that the club's being built, perhaps there's different sets of priorities that go along with that. So I don't know how they define success, Andy. They're the ones that have to kind of answer that question.
I think any GM who goes into any club knows that you have the option of making a coaching change at some point, and you kind of buy yourself a bit more time, right? Not to say that I think he's under pressure in the immediate sense in any way, but now he can go out and get his guy, right, and be more judged on someone of his choosing. What I will say is that, you know, I think this club has talked a lot about bringing in international talent, and that side of it has to be better. I know they've had some difficulties in terms of getting players in the country and things like that because of the pandemic, but that's something that they've put a big emphasis on, and so far I don't think it's quite hit where it needs to be. They've really relied on the young Toronto-based players more than anything else. So that side has to improve, and yeah, he has to get this coaching decision right, and if not, people will ask questions. That's football.
And honestly, I think that McNabb has done a good job bringing good players to this club. Kristoffer Ensa, one of the best players in the CPL for me. Ferrari, signing up some of these young players. Like, there is method to the madness. I get it. But just when you're asking these big picture questions, I'm just not sure where the answer is.
Not asking these questions of Forge FC because they continue to deliver, and they're in the semifinals of CONCACAF League. 2 late goals, 83rd minute, 94th minute. They were down 2-0. They tie it up, but I want you to be honest, Ollie. Were you like Motagua's Twitter account where they said it was over? And They did. They said it was over.
What do you mean they said it was over?
They said they tweeted early that they had won the game, and off they go.
They
pre-tweeted.
Oh, you can't
pre-tweet.
Do not pre-tweet.
What's wrong with you? But were you on that Twitter? Were you following that Twitter? Did you like it, or did you go, oh no?
I did not.
Whistle has not gone.
Motagua was his #1 follow.
I did not like the tweet, Motagua. No, I didn't see the tweet until it was posted.
Sorry.
Until it was posted after the fact. But yeah, I thought they were done. I was looking back at the stats to see if anyone had ever gone away from home and overturned a 2-goal deficit in CONCACAF club competitions before, and hasn't happened since 2003. So I thought they were pretty much done, and the question would have been, who do you take down to Honduras? Do you rest some players ahead of the CPL final? But look, once again, we learn you can't write this team off, and they just keep playing, keep doing their thing, keep trying to push. And, you know, you can come out with it still 2-0 down, or you can come out of it, sometimes things go your way and you draw 2-2.
Typical Oliver, pessimistic plot.
Realistic.
He even said, it was in the last round of the competition against the Costa Rican side. He's like, no chance. Who said that they were going to go on?
Roll the tape.
Roll the tape. Roll the tape. I always back Forge because this is what you see. Continued excellence, the desire to go on and win and to do something special. The loser center back in Crutzen, looks like the cards are stacked against them. They fight to the end. That's why, and I know we're going to get to this, they could go down to Honduras and do the job. I don't question this team, Andy, because when the bright lights shine, they rise to the occasion. They make that stage their own, and that's what makes them a great team.
You do them a bit of a disservice if you don't question whether their ability to do some of these things, because they keep pulling them off.
Twist that against me.
Winning in Costa Rica, I don't think anyone could have reasonably, or winning at home against the Costa Rican team in the way they did. No one could have realistically expected that. That was a brilliant performance.
Except for me, I said it. Coming up to play in Hamilton, November. Can we move on?
The lesson learned here, don't be a pre-tweeter.
Don't pre-tweet.
Don't pre-tweet.
But tag me later.
Okay, but put your money where your mouth is. Put your percentage where your mouth is here, Gareth. What percentage chance are you giving Forge of advancing to CONCACAF League finals?
70.
70%.
Yeah.
After all that hype, all I get is a 70. Isn't that a B?
If the return leg was back up at Tim Hortons Field, it would be much higher. You know me. Come on, I'm not afraid to be bashed, to be bold. 70%. Thinking about the odds, 50-50, like 70 is a good chance. I'm making them the favorite going into this game. Why? Because I think they're a better side than Motagua.
You think they have a 70% chance of winning away from home in Honduras?
That is exactly what I said.
It is way more difficult than that. I'll go 40%, I'll say.
Pessimistic plot.
You're making the game out to be easier than it is. It's not easy.
Canada's going to play in Honduras as well. I don't know who you're taking there.
I have faith in Forge.
All right.
That's not faith.
Well, Gareth, you had alluded to this, but I'm going to go to you first, Ollie, with Daniel Crutzen. He ended up leaving the game, the defender there, with an injury. Still don't have an update on him. But how does that affect Forge's chances in the CPL final if this is somebody that they could be missing?
Yeah, it's going to be tough. They've got other good defenders that can step in. Tiso stepped in last night's game. Methuselah's been really good this season. Obviously, Dom Samuel is there. But what you lose with Crutzen is the guy who sets up their attacks, right? He's not just a central defender in the defensive sense. He's so good on the ball. I don't think there's anyone better in the CPL in that facet of the game. And he's also emerged, without David Edgar this year as a real leader in that backline. He is going to be a big loss, and that, I think, is something that could have a big impact on the CPL final.
I love Crutzen. He's a top 5 player for me in the Canadian Premier League, but I'm not sure how much they'll miss him. The reason why I say that, because over the course of the season, no Jakovic, no Crutzen. This team has played without their top 2 center backs all season long, really. Methuselah stepped up, played a role. Ashton Yodi-Janssen can go back. He can play in that role in a back 2 as well, which opens up another midfield spot for another very good player. They're just so deep. Yes, it is a blow. It's a loss. But I'm not sure that this is kind of a death blow for a team that's going to be playing at home and, has all kinds of talent to kind of make up for that loss.
Busy week and a bit for Forge FC. The North Star Shield will be lifted on December 5th, but who gets to do so? Forge hosts Pacific FC at Tim Hortons Field. Join us 3:30 p.m. ET right here on OneSoccer as we get you set for the championship match.